Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another Historical Humans Heritage episode. Today we are looking at yet another UNESCO World Heritage Site. This time we are looking at one based out of Madagascar and the continent of Africa. We're looking at the Royal Hill of Ambohimanga. Whew.
Yes, the Royal Hill is a city and burial site that compromises a series of sacred. It comprises a series of sacred places. Excuse me. Uh, it is very tightly associated with the national identity of Madagascar, and it has remained a pilgrimage site to this day. It is a series of fortified ditches that lead into the city, in which a number of individuals are interred. Um, it was the uh, religious capital of the Kingdom of Madagascar during the 19th century and served as the burial ground for Madagascar's rulers. So it is a very important what's the word? It's a very important site for that reason. It's very important to these people and honestly to the world because it's where this entire civilization had its spiritual and ceremonial center.
Yeah, I mean, you see a lot of connection between ceremonial and usually like royal or familial powers. They usually try to tie into that and add some level of validation with it. But it's really cool because the Royal Hill here not only is the burial place for a lot of these royals and but it's also the home to a lot of sacred places. I mean, there are sacred fountains, basins, wood, sacrificial stones, majestic royal trees. There's a lot of cultural value in this site that goes just beyond even being the home of the royals or burial of the royals.
Yeah, and it is and its design is also very much considered representative of the social and political architecture of the Malagasy people from as far back as the 16th century. So this is really time in a bottle for the last 500 years.
There is a mention of during the French colonial period of Madagascar, um, the wooden houses, a symbol of the royal tombs that are there, were demolished by the French, but in 2008 they were actually rebuilt.
Yeah, many things that are on the World Heritage sites are by nature of their need to exist rebuilt. They are, the originals are very rarely still standing in their original form because, well, it's usually been a few hundred years and
We should talk about the
violence,
Shaolin
neglect,
Temple.
and other things
We should
have
talk the
happened.
Shaolin Temple if we want to talk about reconstructed historic monuments that were destroyed needlessly.
Yeah.
We don't need to bring other sites to this, Justin. Let's talk. Let's have a good time and talk about Ambohimanga.
But it's
So
kind of interesting because you see with this site that there's a lot of fortifications. The geographic position is a very powerful one that offers a complete view of the surrounding area, which gives it strategic and defensive importance. And then it also witnesses a strong royal power, a decision making center that serves for the model of the future. And it basically encompasses all of this, and you could see the different political phases through the constructions on the site. I mean, you were talking about the French colonial period, but like even before then.
yeah, and like we talked about in, I believe, our previous um, historical humans heritage with the Korean sites. This site here is under the management of both would be considered federal and local authority as the Office of Cultural Site of Ambohimanga under the
Oscar.
Oscar, which is under the Ministry of Culture at the federal government of Madagascar, manages the money from entry fees, but also works with the Village Committee, which is the adjacent communities surrounding Ambohimanga to manage and preserve this site. So it's local. The local people are engaged with it. The national government is engaged with it. We have multiple levels of investment in this site's protection and preservation. And that's something you don't always get to see, but it's something you really do want to see, because if the people who live there are benefiting from it and love it and want to protect it, that's usually a sign that it will be protected far more than any, federal or governmental mandate throwing money its way.
Well, and it's currently facing quite a few threats that are not development related, because a lot of times these sites you'll see face threats of development or face threats of destruction because of changing ideologies. This site specifically is facing a natural enemy, a couple of natural enemies actually. There's been spontaneous developments of a few exotic species, invasive species, bambusa and lantana, which can constitutes a threat that could degrade the natural landscape, and that there have been efforts to try and mitigate this and replace these exotic species with more localized natural species and basically snuff them out. But then also, they're in the middle of a jungle, so the threat of fires poses probably the biggest risk to the site, because wildfires destroy everything in their path.
Yeah, and with the bambusa and lantana, both are uniquely dangerous ecological threats. Bambusa is a type of bamboo that grows in vast clusters, which means once one stalk goes down, the entire surrounding area just becomes bamboo stalk.
Oh, jeez.
And bamboo is known to have the force to push through most of just about anything in its effort to grow upwards towards the sun. So this gets near a building, and I can promise you that building is going to have its roof punched out in no time. Lantana, on the other thing, is, in my opinion, the more insidious one, because lantana is a flower. It's a flowering plant. It's a little flowering plant, but it's very adaptable, and so when one grows, it will spread over everything. And instead of just outright destroying it like the bambusa, the lantana is just going to cover everything like a giant invasive ivy.
Ooh.
Like Spanish moss.
Yeah.
Kind of, except it's flowering. So it's pretty, but it will outcompete everything it encounters, and it does not care what it grows on.
So pretty insidious plants, you're right. And then the other thing that's important about this site is a lot of the restorative efforts. I mean, you mentioned the rebuilding of the royal tombs that were demolished, the wooden houses that were rebuilt in 2008, but then they also took on a lot of restoration work in 96 that helped preserve a lot of these buildings, and they actually used traditional Malagasy ways to do so. And what's even more important is the physical remains of the sovereigns that were removed from the site in 1897, when it was in vogue to steal human remains, have since been replaced to their original tombs and helped restore the sacredness of the site, so to speak.
That's very good to see the dead bodies being brought back to their resting places, because usually once they're taken out, they don't ever get to come back. Once they're gone, they're gone forever.
I'm not looking at anyone in particular. British Museum. If we don't have a single jab at the British Museum every single podcast, what are we doing?
It's Madagascar. I don't know if we have a chance at that. Besides, I believe the next week's episode is Australia, so you'll have your chance there.
Yes. But I think that's a good point to wrap up too. It's a really interesting perspective, seeing something that isn't super well known, but something that is also just really cool, really important to this culture, and something that I think a lot more eyes should be spread upon, because it's important to learn about other cultures. So believe it or not.
Look at the pathway on the image. I mean, the main image that they show on the UNESCO World Heritage site, like that's just some beautiful, beautiful design.
Oh,
it's crazy to think that fence is so old.
Now that's modern safety to ensure that the tourists don't die.
Specifically Americans, because if there is no railings, we will fall over it. Simply because we thought we could walk there.
And on that terrible bombshell, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave a like down below. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe so you're notified every time we release new content. thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the land down under next week.